The ADHD Boy Mom Handbook. From Frustration to Understanding. Positive Parenting Strategies to Help Your Son Focus, Behave, and Thrive. By Marlow Hayes. Introduction. The clock on the microwave says 7:15 a.m. In exactly 30 minutes, the yellow bus will pull up to the curb. For most people, 30 minutes is plenty of time to put on shoes, grab a backpack, and head out the door. But in your house, 30 minutes feels like a countdown to a bomb going off. You have already asked him to put on his socks 4 times. The first time you were nice. The second time, you were firm. The third time, your voice got louder. Now on the 4th time, you are hovering over him while he sits on the floor. He isn't putting on socks. He is staring at a crack in the baseboard, or he is spinning a toy car. Or he is wondering if a shark could beat a tiger in a fight. "Get your socks on now," you yell. He jumps. He looks at you with wide, surprised eyes, as if he didn't even know you were in the room. He starts to cry. You feel a sharp pain in your chest because you didn't want to yell. You hate yelling. You promised yourself last night that today would be different. You wanted to be the fun mom, the calm mom, the mom who has everything under control. Instead, by 7:45 a.m., you are exhausted. You watch the bus pull away, and you sit down at the kitchen table with your head in your hands. You feel like a failure. You feel like a policeman mom who spends every waking hour giving orders, handing out tickets, and waiting for the next disaster. If this sounds like your life, you are not alone. You are not a bad mother, and your son is not a bad kid. There is a reason why your morning feels like a battle. There is a reason why he can't hear you until you scream. It isn't because he is trying to be difficult. It is because his brain is built differently. The boy who couldn't sit still. In 1994, a mother named Debbie sat in a small chair at a school in Baltimore, Maryland. She was there to talk to her son's teacher. Debbie was a school principal herself, so she knew how schools worked. She was used to being the one in charge. But that day, she felt small. Her son, Michael, was a handful. He couldn't sit still in class. He was always wiggling, always humming, and always getting into trouble for not paying attention. The teacher looked at Debbie and didn't offer hope. The teacher said that Michael couldn't be quiet and couldn't stay focused. Then came the words that would haunt Debbie for years. He will never be able to focus on anything. At that moment, Debbie had a choice. She could believe the expert. She could look at her son and see a problem that needed to be fixed. She could spend the rest of Michael's childhood trying to force him to be normal. Or she could look at her son and see something else. Debbie knew Michael had energy that didn't fit in a standard classroom. She knew his brain moved at 100 miles per hour. She decided to find a place where he was allowed to go fast. She put him in a swimming pool. In the water, Michael didn't have to sit still. In the water, his distractions became an advantage. He noticed the way the water felt against his skin. He noticed the tiny movements of his hands. He found something that was more interesting than the crack in the baseboard. That little boy was Michael Phelps. He went on to become the most successful Olympic athlete in history. He didn't succeed despite his ADHD. In many ways, he succeeded because of it. But he never would have made it to the podium if his mother hadn't stopped being his policeman and started being his coach. For over 100 years, doctors and teachers have tried to figure out why some boys seem to be driven by a motor. Back in 1902, a doctor named George Still stood in front of a group of people in London. He described children who were defiant, impulsive, and couldn't stay on task. At the time, people thought these kids just had bad morals. They thought the parents were lazy or the children were just mean. We know better now. We know that ADHD is not a choice. It is not a result of too much sugar or too many video games. It is a physical difference in how the brain is wired. If you have a son with ADHD, you are raising a child with a race car brain. It is powerful, fast, and capable of amazing things. But there's a catch. He has bicycle brakes. Imagine trying to stop a Ferrari with the brakes from a Huffy bike. That's what's happening inside your son's head every single day. When you tell him to brush his teeth, his brain is already 3 miles down the road thinking about Minecraft or a cool rock he found. He isn't ignoring you on purpose. He literally cannot break his thoughts fast enough to hear what you are saying. This book is about helping you upgrade those brakes. It is about moving away from the policeman mom role where you are always reacting to crashes. It is about becoming a coach mom. A coach doesn't just yell when someone misses a shot. A coach understands the game, knows the player's strengths, and builds a plan to help them win. Sarah's breaking point. Sarah Miller lives in a nice house in Chicago. She is 38 years old, and works as a marketing manager for a big tech company. In her office, Sarah is a rock star. She is organized, she has color-coded calendars, she meets every deadline. People look to her for answers. But when Sarah pulls into her driveway at 5:30 p.m., all that confidence disappears. The moment she walks through the door, the noise hits her. Her 8-year-old son, Leo, is jumping off the back of the sofa. There are Lego bricks scattered across the rug like landmines. The kitchen island, which Sarah wants to keep clear and beautiful, is covered in crumpled school papers, half-eaten snacks, and a permission slip that was due 3 days ago. "Leo, get off the couch," Sarah says, trying to keep her voice calm. Leo doesn't even look up. He is pretending to be a superhero. "Leo, I'm serious. We need to start homework." Nothing. By 6:15 p.m., Sarah is standing over Leo at the kitchen island. They are staring at a math worksheet that should take 10 minutes. They have been sitting there for 45. Leo is chewing on his pencil. He is leaning so far back in his chair that it's about to tip over. Every time Sarah tries to explain a problem, Leo asks a question about space aliens or tells her his toe itches. "Just do the work," Sarah finally snaps. Leo's face scrunches up. "It's too hard. You're mean." He pushes the paper off the table and runs to his room, slamming the door. Sarah sits down in the mess. She feels like she is losing her son. Every interaction they have is a fight. She worries that if she keeps yelling, Leo will grow up thinking he is stupid or bad. She worries that their relationship is being broken, one math worksheet at a time. Sarah is at the end of her rope. She is tired of being the bad guy. She wants to enjoy her son again. She wants to see the bright, funny, creative boy she knows is under all that defiance. You might see yourself in Sarah. You might see your son in Leo. Their story is the story of so many families living with ADHD. Throughout this book, we are going to follow Sarah and Leo as they learn a new way to live. We are going to watch Sarah trade her police badge for a whistle and a playbook. The goal of this book is not to fix your son. Your son is not a broken machine. He is a boy with a specific set of needs. When those needs are met, he can do things other kids only dream of. By the time you finish these pages, you will have a completely different view of your home. You will understand the why behind the what. Instead of seeing a boy who won't listen, you will see a brain that is starving for a chemical called dopamine. Instead of seeing a messy room as a sign of laziness, you will see a struggle with executive function. You are going to learn how to stop the yelling cycle by understanding how your son's brain hears sound, why traditional punishments like timeouts often fail with ADHD boys, and what to do instead. Simple ways to turn the homework war into a series of small, easy wins. How to talk to teachers and schools so they see your son's potential instead of just his behavior. Strategies to help your son make friends and handle the big, volcano emotions that come with ADHD. This isn't about being a perfect parent. There is no such thing. This is about being a connected parent. It is about building a bond so strong that the storms of ADHD can't knock it down. The science of hope. You can trust this approach because it is built on real science and real history. We aren't going to look at theories that only work in a doctor's office. We are going to look at what works in real kitchens, real grocery stores, and real school meetings. We will look at the lives of men like Winston Churchill. As a boy, he was at the bottom of his class. His teachers thought he was slow, and his father thought he was a failure because he couldn't organize his thoughts. But that same disorganized brain eventually saved the world during World War II. We will look at Alexander Graham Bell, who was so distracted by the world around him that he struggled in school. Yet his wandering mind led to the invention of the telephone. These men didn't succeed because someone cured their ADHD. They succeeded because they learned how to drive their race car brains. And usually, there was someone in their corner, a mother, a teacher, or a mentor, who refused to give up on them. The path ahead, the journey from frustration to understanding, starts right now. It starts with a simple shift in how you look at your son. In the chapters ahead, we will break down the walls of executive function, so you can see exactly where your son is getting stuck. We will talk about the dopamine gap and why video games are easy while chores are impossible. We will look at how to build a connection deposit so your relationship stays healthy, even on the hard days. You are the mother your son was meant to have. You are already doing the hard work just by being here and wanting to understand him better. The policeman can retire. The bus is coming. The clock is ticking. But this time, you have a plan. The first step is understanding that his brain isn't bad, it's just fast. How that race car brain actually works. Chapter 1. Why does my son only listen when I yell? It is just a building block, Arvid. It does not actually do anything on its own. You are wasting your time. Arvid Carlson looked at his colleague, then back at the small white rabbits in the lab. It was 1957 at Lund University in Sweden. The scientific world was certain about how the brain worked. They believed the chemical called dopamine was just a precursor, a leftover scrap used to make other, more important chemicals like adrenaline. To the experts of the day, dopamine was the sawdust on the floor of the workshop. It wasn't the furniture. I think you are wrong, Arvid replied. He wasn't trying to be difficult. He just couldn't ignore what he was seeing. Arvid had given these rabbits a drug that drained certain chemicals from their brains. The result was startling. The rabbits weren't just sleepy. They were like statues. They sat perfectly still, unable to move, unable to eat, and seemingly unable to want anything. Their drive was gone. Arvid had a theory. He believed that if he put dopamine back into their systems, they would wake up. His peers thought he was chasing ghosts. But Arvid injected the rabbits with L-DAPA, a substance that the brain turns into dopamine. He waited. For a few minutes, nothing happened. The lab was quiet. Then a nose twitched. One of the rabbits shifted its weight. A moment later, the statues were gone. The rabbits were hopping, sniffing, and moving around the cage as if they had never been frozen at all. In that moment, Arvid Carlson discovered the spark plug of the human brain. He proved that dopamine wasn't just a building block. It was the chemical that told the brain, pay attention, this matters, move now. This discovery would eventually earn Arvid a Nobel Prize, but more importantly for you, it explains why your son is currently spinning in circles on the rug, instead of putting on his shoes. The myth of the naughty boy. Most people look at a boy who won't listen and see a behavior problem. If you go to a grocery store and your son is climbing the shelves while you calmly ask him to stop, the people in the cereal aisle aren't thinking about brain chemicals. They are thinking, that boy needs a firmer hand, or that mom has no control. Even you might start to believe this. You might think your son is being defiant on purpose. You might feel like he is testing you, or that he is simply lazy. This is the great myth of ADHD, the idea that the D stands for a lack of willpower. The truth is that your son's brain is often like those rabbits in Arvid's lab before the injection. Not because he can't move, but because his spark plug is misfiring. In a typical brain, dopamine levels stay at a steady humming level. When a mother says, "Hey honey, it's time to brush your teeth," that brain gets a tiny little squirt of dopamine. It's just enough to make the task feel important enough to do. The brain hears the request, recognizes the importance, and sends a signal to the legs to walk to the bathroom. In an ADHD brain, that baseline level of dopamine is much lower. It isn't humming, it's barely a whisper. When you say, "brush your teeth," in a calm, loving voice, his brain literally doesn't register the importance. The spark isn't strong enough to jump the gap from hearing you to doing the task. But then something happens. You ask a second time, a third, a fourth. By the fifth time, your face is red, your veins are popping, and you scream, "Get in the bathroom right now." Suddenly he moves. He moves fast. This isn't because he finally decided to be a good boy. It's because your yelling triggered a massive surge of adrenaline and cortisol, dopamine's high-stress cousins. Your anger provided the jumpstart his brain was waiting for. You aren't just a mom in that moment. You are a human dopamine injection. Sarah's kitchen, the 7:30 a.m. battle. Sarah Miller sat at her kitchen island, her head in her hands. It was Tuesday morning, and the command center, her nickname for the cluttered granite counter, was failing. Leo, her 8-year-old, was wearing one sock. Just one. He was currently using a plastic spoon to see how far he could catapult a Cheerio across the room. "Leo, please put your other sock on," Sarah said. Her voice was steady. She had read the parenting blogs. She knew she was supposed to stay calm. Leo didn't look up. The Cheerio hit the fridge with a soft thwack. "Leo, shoes and socks. We have to go in 5 minutes." Nothing. It was as if she were a ghost speaking to a wall. "Leo, look at me. Socks. Now." Leo looked at her, blinked once, and then reached for another Cheerio. Sarah felt the heat rising in her chest. She felt the familiar snap in her brain. "Leo, if you do not have those shoes on in 10 seconds, no iPad for a week. Move it." Leo jumped. He scrambled for the sock. He looked terrified, but he was moving. He got his shoes on in record time. As Sarah watched him head for the car, she didn't feel like a winner. She felt like a monster. She sat in the driver's seat and felt the sting of tears. She hated that she had to become a person she didn't recognize just to get a pair of sneakers on an 8-year-old. She felt like she was addicting her son to her anger. She was right. But she didn't realize that she wasn't failing at parenting. She was just fighting a biological dopamine gap she didn't yet understand. The race car brain with bicycle brakes. Dr. Ned Hallowell, one of the world's leading experts on ADHD, often tells parents that their sons have a Ferrari engine for a brain, but bicycle brakes for a nervous system. Think about that Ferrari engine. It is powerful. It wants to go 200 miles per hour. It is built for speed, excitement, and high-octane fuel. Dopamine is that fuel. When your son is doing something he loves, like building a complex Lego set or playing a fast-paced video game, his Ferrari is humming. Those activities provide a steady stream of high-octane interest. His brain is flooded with the chemicals it needs to focus. In those moments, he doesn't have ADHD. He has super focus. But bicycle brakes are the problem. In the brain, the brakes are located in the frontal lobe. This is the part of the brain that handles executive function. It's the part that says, stop looking at the Legos and start looking for your backpack. In boys with ADHD, the engine is faster than average, but the brakes are underpowered. When you ask him to do something boring, like put on socks or finish a worksheet, you are asking that 200 miles per hour engine to slow down using nothing but a pair of squeaky rubber pads. The engine wins every time. Of course, there is a crash. Yelling, threats, and crises are the crashes that finally bring the car to a halt. The problem is that over time, the car gets pretty beat up from all those crashes. Michael Phelps and the Invisible Coach. Long before he was the most decorated Olympian in history, Michael Phelps was just a boy in Baltimore who couldn't sit still. In 1994, his teachers were exhausted. Michael was a blur. He was the kid who would forget his books, the kid who would hum loudly during a test, and the kid who seemed to have a motor that never turned off. One teacher famously told his mother, Debbie, "Michael can't sit still, Michael can't be quiet, he will never be able to focus on anything." In those early years, Michael's brain was a race car with no track. When he first started swimming, he wasn't an instant success. He was loud. He was disruptive. He didn't always listen to the coaches. To many, he looked like a defiant kid. But his coach, Bob Bowman, noticed something. If he gave Michael a boring set of laps to swim, Michael would goof off. He would splash other kids or go off course. His dopamine levels were too low to care about a simple warm-up. However, if Bob gave Michael a challenge, a high-stakes race, or a difficult goal with a timer, Michael changed. The dopamine hit of the competition acted like Arvid Carlson's injection. Suddenly, the boy who couldn't focus on anything became the most focused person in the building. Bob Bowman didn't succeed by breaking Michael's spirit or by yelling until Michael was scared. He succeeded by realizing that Michael's brain only turned on when the challenge was as big as his engine. Michael didn't need better ears to hear the coach. He needed a higher frequency to tune into. The low arousal theory. Why your mom voice is invisible. There is a scientific concept called the low arousal theory. It sounds complicated, but it's actually very simple. It suggests that people with ADHD feel understimulated by the world around them. Imagine you are sitting in a room where the lights are very dim and someone is whispering a story to you. Eventually, you might get bored or even fall asleep. To stay awake, you might start tapping your foot, humming, or looking for something, anything, to wake up your senses. For your son, a normal day feels like that dim room. When you speak in a calm parenting book voice, you are whispering in that dim room. Your voice is literally below the threshold of what his brain considers important. He isn't ignoring you. He truly doesn't feel the weight of your words. Yelling, however, is like turning on a 500-watt spotlight and blasting a foghorn. The arousal level goes through the roof. His brain finally says, "Whoa, something is happening. Pay attention." The danger here is a cycle called emotional escalation. 1. You ask nicely. He doesn't hear it. 2. You ask firmly. He still doesn't hear it. 3. You feel ignored and get angry. 4. You yell. 5. His brain gets the dopamine adrenaline hit it needs to function. 6. He does the task. What does he learn? He learns that he doesn't need to move until you yell. He learns that your nice voice means you can keep playing, and your angry voice means start now. You are accidentally training his brain to wait for the foghorn before it starts the engine. The intention versus action gap. Researchers at the University of California once looked at this exact problem. They wanted to know if ADHD kids were actually defiant or if something else was happening. They found that ADHD children often have a gap between their intentions and their actions. If you ask an ADHD boy, "Do you want to make your mom angry?" He will almost always say no. He loves you. He wants you to be happy. He intends to put on his shoes. But between the intention, I should put on my shoes, and the action, picking up the shoe, there is a massive canyon. In a typical brain, there is a sturdy bridge over that canyon. In an ADHD brain, the bridge is made of wet paper. He starts to walk toward the shoes, but then he sees a cool shadow on the wall, or he remembers a funny joke, or he wonders how many teeth a shark has. Because his brakes, the frontal lobe, aren't strong enough to stop those distracting thoughts, he falls off the bridge and into the canyon. When you yell at him, you aren't fixing his character. You are just providing a temporary high-stress bridge. The goal of becoming a coach mom is to help him build a permanent bridge that doesn't require you to scream across the canyon every morning. Breaking the yelling cycle. If you are like Sarah, you are tired of being the foghorn. You want to know how to get him to listen without losing your mind. The first step is a mindset shift. You have to stop seeing his lack of response as disrespect and start seeing it as a signal problem. If your television had a fuzzy picture, you wouldn't yell at the screen. You would check the cables. You would look for a better signal. When your son isn't listening, the cable is loose. Yelling is one way to tighten it, but it's a way that eventually breaks the TV. Here is how you start to change the signal. 1. The touch before talk rule. Because his Ferrari engine is so loud, your voice often can't get through. Instead of calling to him from the kitchen, walk over to him. Put a hand on his shoulder. Wait for him to look up and make eye contact. You are syncing your signals before you send the message. This provides a physical spark that a voice alone cannot. 2. Use high stimulation, low volume. You don't have to yell to be high stimulation. You can whisper. You can use a funny accent. You can turn the lights off and on once. Anything that is unexpected will trigger a tiny hit of dopamine. Sarah found that if she whispered, "There is a secret mission in the bathroom involving a toothbrush," Leo would actually look up. It was interesting, and interest is the currency of the ADHD brain. 3. The when-then phrasing. Instead of "put your shoes on or we aren't going to the park," which is a threat that creates stress, use "when your shoes are on, then we can head to the park." This frames the boring task as the key that unlocks the high dopamine reward. It helps his brain build that bridge over the canyon. Back to the command center. A few nights after her rock-bottom moment, Sarah tried something different. It was 8 p.m., toothbrushing time. Usually this involved Sarah screaming from the hallway while Leo jumped on his bed. Sarah felt the urge to yell. She could feel the foghorn warming up in her throat. Instead, she took a deep breath. She walked into Leo's room. He was halfway under his covers, pretend fighting an invisible monster. Sarah didn't say a word. She sat on the edge of the bed. She waited. After a moment, Leo stopped. He looked at her, curious. "Hey," she said softly. She put her hand on his knee. "Hey, Mommy," he said. "I have a challenge for you. I'm going to set this timer for 2 minutes. If you can get your teeth brushed and your PJs on before it beeps, we have time for an extra long chapter of our book. If not, we just do a short one. What do you think?" Leo's eyes lit up. 2 minutes? That's impossible. "I don't know," Sarah teased. "You're pretty fast." He wasn't moving because he was scared. He was moving because Sarah had turned a boring task into a high-stakes race. She had hacked his dopamine. As she heard the water running in the bathroom, Sarah didn't feel like a monster. She felt like a coach. She realized that Leo wasn't a bad kid who needed to be punished. He was a spark-plug kid who needed a better connection. The secret language of the brain. Arvid Carlson's rabbits prove that the brain isn't a machine driven by willpower alone. It is a biological system driven by chemicals. When you understand that your son's brain is literally starving for the signal that says, "This matters," your frustration begins to turn into empathy. You start to see that his defiance is often just disconnection. He isn't trying to make your life hard. He is trying to navigate a world that is often too quiet and too dim for his high-speed mind. He is waiting for the spark. Your job isn't to be the lightning bolt that strikes him every morning. Your job is to help him find the internal spark that allows him to drive his own race car. It takes time. It takes patience. And yes, it takes a lot of deep breaths in the kitchen. But once you stop yelling, you might be surprised at what you start to hear. You might hear the sound of a boy who finally feels understood. Your son isn't ignoring you. His brain is just waiting for a signal it can actually feel. Chapter 2. Executive Function. The brain's overwhelmed air traffic controller. The young boy sat at his wooden desk, staring at a blank piece of paper. His heart felt like a trapped bird fluttering against his ribs. Outside the windows of the Grand Harrow School, the English sky was gray and heavy, matching the mood in his chest. He knew he was smart. He could talk for hours about history or battles. But right now, the words wouldn't come. His pens were missing, his notes were a jumbled mess of ink stains and torn edges. He could hear the scratching of other boys' nibs on paper, a sound that felt like a tiny saw against his nerves. He felt like a disappointment. He knew what his father, a powerful and stern man named Lord Randolph, thought of him. His father saw a boy who was lazy, messy, and careless. In his father's eyes, he was a failure who couldn't even manage the simplest tasks of a schoolboy. The boy squeezed his eyes shut, trying to force his brain to just work. He wanted to be organized. He wanted to be the son his father could be proud of. But his mind felt like a chaotic storm where every thought was flying in a different direction at once. This boy was Winston Churchill. In 1888, he was 13 years old and tucked away at one of the strictest schools in the world. To the teachers and his family, Winston was a problem. He was consistently at the bottom of his class. He lost his books, he forgot his assignments, he was distractible and unruly. His father wrote him letters that would break any child's heart, calling his work slovenly, and telling him he would become a social outcast if he didn't change his ways. Winston wasn't trying to be difficult. He wasn't choosing to be messy. He was living with a brain that had a world-class engine, but no one in the driver's seat to steer it. Back then, there was no name for what Winston was experiencing. People didn't talk about brain wiring or developmental delays. They talked about character and willpower. If a boy couldn't keep his desk clean or finish his Latin homework, it was seen as a moral failing. Today, we know better. We know that Winston wasn't a bad boy. He was a boy whose executive function, the brain's management system, wasn't yet strong enough to handle the demands of his environment. The tower without a controller. Think of your son's brain as a busy international airport. He has amazing planes. These are his ideas, his energy, his creativity, and his intelligence. Some of those planes are fast jets, and some are huge cargo planes full of big dreams. But for an airport to work, you need more than just planes and a runway. You need the air traffic control tower. The people in the tower have a huge job. They decide which plane takes off first. They tell the planes when to wait. They make sure two planes don't crash into each other on the runway. They keep track of the schedule and make sure there is enough fuel. The air traffic control tower is built and staffed pretty early on. By the time a boy is 7 or 8, he usually has a few controllers in there, helping him remember his shoes or stay in his seat. But in an ADHD brain, that tower is still under construction. The walls might be up, but the radios aren't working yet, and the controllers are still in training. This is why your son can be brilliant at building a complex Lego set, but can't remember to put his socks in the hamper. The plane of the Lego set is exciting and high speed, so it lands itself. But the plane of the socks is boring and small. Without a strong controller in the tower to guide that small plane in, it just circles the airport until it runs out of fuel and disappears. For Winston Churchill, the tower was almost empty during his school years. He could speak with the wisdom of a man twice his age, but he couldn't keep track of a permission slip. He was a race car brain with bicycle brakes, a phrase often used by experts to describe this exact struggle. His brain was moving at 100 miles per hour, but his ability to stop, plan, and organize was moving at the speed of a toddler on a trike. The 7 pillars of the tower. To understand why your son does what he does, it helps to look at the specific jobs the air traffic controllers are supposed to do. Scientists call these executive functions. There are 7 main jobs, and for a boy with ADHD, almost all of them are running behind schedule. Self-awareness. This is the internal camera. It's the ability to look at yourself and say, "How am I doing?" Most boys with ADHD don't realize they are humming loudly, wiggling their legs, or that their tone of voice sounds angry until someone points it out. Their camera is turned off. Inhibition. This is the brake pedal. It's the ability to stop an impulse when your son sees jump. A strong brake pedal lets him stop and think, "Wait, I'm wearing my school shoes." For your son, that brake pedal is often disconnected. He jumps first and realizes he's wet later. Working memory. This is the mental sticky note. It's where we hold information while we are using it. If you tell your son, "Go upstairs, get your brush, put on your blue shirt, and bring down your backpack," you are giving him 4 sticky notes. For many ADHD boys, their mental sticky notes are covered in grease. The information just slides right off. By the time he hits the top of the stairs, he has forgotten why he is there. Emotional control. This is the volume knob for feelings. When something goes wrong, like a video game character